Okay, so now that we know what the URL object looks like and we know what the query string object looks like that we'll work with heavily, it's time to talk about the request and the response and server object. So remember that a client is going to send a request to a server, and the server is going to find a resource that the client has requested and send a response back to the client. All right. So we construct, or in the servers we will write, we will construct our request. Sometimes, I mean, excuse me, our response, and sometimes we'll construct our request in that server as well. But a lot of times we'll write the client side code as well that sends a request to the server. All right. So to do this, Node has implemented what they call the HTTP dot client request object. So HTTP is the module, client request is the object. All right. So the client request object is actually created internally whenever we call HTTP request. All right. And that's usually when we're building. Again, we'll be using the request when we build some sort of HTTP client. Remember, if we got a server, we also need a client. So we'll be building our client as well. Not as much, but we will build some clients. All right. Now, this HTTP client request is actually what we'll use to represent the request headed to the server from the client. All right. Now, the key thing about this request is that it's a writable stream, and we've seen streams earlier, right? When we're working with file systems, etc. But it's a writable stream, and because it's a writable stream, then we get access to those events that those streams give us, right? And because we have access to the events, then we can write callbacks and listeners to handle those events. All right. So let's take a look at some code that creates a request object. So the first thing we have to do is create our HTTP, or excuse me, import the HTTP module. So you should be getting familiar with seeing this require over and over and over and over and over again. All right. The next thing you'll see is I'm going to create an object literal called options. All right. And this options represents the parameters that we want to give to our server that defines how to open and send the client HTTP request to the server. All right. So things like the URL needs to be in there, the host name, the path, the port, the method that we're sending that request with, right? So we see that we're setting our host name to www.spcollege.edu. Our path is just the root. The port is going to be the standard port that servers listen to, which is 8080. And our method is a post. All right. Here, the next line is actually our request. Yes. All right. So the um, request is going to take as the first parameter our options, so it knows how to send the request, and then it's going to take a callback function. All right. So our callback function executes once this request is sent, which is done when we hit end. So once this end executes, then this callback function is going to fire. All right. So what is our callback function doing? Excuse me. Handling the response from the server. So when the server sends back its response, this callback is going to handle it for us. What's it going to do? It's going to be given this response parameter. All right. And here we create an empty string, and we're saying on the response coming back on the data event, then we're going to append the data that's sent back to a string, to that string. All right. And we're saying when the response emits the end event, then we're just going to log string to the console. Okay. All right. So that's it for our client request in a nutshell. Now the response pretty much looks the exact same way. Um, and we just saw those. We saw an example of the response coming back, but the events that you need to know about that are available on the response objects are the response itself. That's going to be emitted when the response request is received from the server, right? So we saw that right there. The socket is emitted after a socket is assigned to this request. So I want you to do some research on what a socket actually is. All right, so we got a connect event, an upgrade event, a continue event, write, end, abort, set timeout, set no delay, and set socket keep alive. So again, I'm not going to tell you what all those events are. I want you to do some research with the object and see what those events are. And I'm sorry, I said those were server response object events. Those are the client request or server request events. I'm sorry. All right, so now let's talk about the server response object. All right, so remember the client creates the request, so we'll be implementing requests in our HTTP clients. All right, and the server sends back a server response, a HTTP response. So we'll be constructing our response on the server side. So again, this is client side code. Our server response will be on the server side. All right. So whenever your server is going to create that request, then we're going to create that response. All right. Then that response that we send back gets sent or passed to the request event handler as the second argument. So again, that is our response coming back from the server. All right. So again, the server response is going to implement a writable stream. So you're going to get all the functionality that we get in a writable stream. All right. So we can use the write method to write to the server response. All right. And we can also pipe it back as we send the data back to the client, which gives us more better performance. All right. All right. So just a brief overview of some of the events that are a part of the server response. All right. And again, gonna make you do the research on your own. Close, header send date, status code. Some of the methods, write header. All right. So you should know what a header is. Write, because we're going to write, and of course, good old end. All right. And constructing the HTTP response, I'm not going to show it now because it really looks a lot like this, but we'll see it in just a minute when I create a server. All right. Now, just because I mentioned it, the server. Let's talk about a server real quick, and in another video, we're going to talk about how we actually, or look at how we create a server to serve static content. All right. The server object basically is what we're building in this backend course. It's the framework that's going to implement our HTTP server. I mean, the HTTP server object is basically lays the foundation for the server applications that we create. All right, so what's it going to do? It's going to create an underlying socket. Here's that word socket again that I need you to research. So it's going to create an underlying socket that's going to listen on a port. All right, so remember, you have to listen. A server listens on a port for incoming request. All right, so it's going to listen on a port, and it's going to handle our server application is going to handle receiving the request and then sending the response back out to the client. All right, so basically all it's doing is creating a socket to listen for a request on a port. Request comes, it's going to do something with that request, and it's going to create a response and send that response back. All right, so the server object is actually what we call an event emitter. All right, and I'm going to give you some research to do on event emitters as well, but I think we've seen those earlier. All right, so when we create an HTTP server, because it implements event emitter, there's certain events that we need to handle at a minimum. All right, so at a minimal, you need to handle the request event that is triggered whenever a request from the client is received. All right, so at a minimum, we need to handle the request, because if we don't, there is absolutely no purpose for our server object. All right, or our server that we're creating. All right, so in the next video, we're going to talk about how you actually create one of these servers. So we're going to create a server, we're going to listen for a request, and we're going to send a response actually back to the server. All right, and you'll see that it's very, very simple. All right, take care.